Hi, in this chapter we are going to talk about rule-based models. Especially we will focus on decision trees and briefly describe the RuleFit algorithm and decision rules. So a decision tree usually partitions data into subsets based on some cutoff values of the features. These cutoff values are found by minimizing a certain criteria via greedy search, especially in the card algorithms. However, there are some other decision tree algorithms that do it slightly differently. In the end, for the decision tree, in the leaf nodes that are produced, a constant prediction is usually provided, which is kind of a constant mean, and that we term here CM for each region M. And therefore we can kind of describe the prediction function as a sum of different regions that are denoted here by this indicator function, and multiply it with a constant mean prediction in that corresponding leaf node. Meaning that in the end, for a given region, we only have here one constant value, one constant mean active. So on the right hand side, we see an example of a decision tree that splits here in the first place by feature 1, and then splits again on the left hand side according to feature 3 again, and on the right hand side according to feature 2. As we can see, this kind of structure here is nicely interpretable, and in the leaf nodes we kind of can find the constant mean that is used as prediction. If you look at the bike sharing data with humidity on this dimension and temperature on this dimension, and fit a decision tree, it kind of does partitioning of data and fits in each leaf node a constant mean, which we can see in the form of a flat surface over here, and here as a contour plot looking from above with a different coloring here. This yellow part here should be that part here. We have just here different colors, so don't get distracted by this. The nice thing about the decision tree is that it's applicable to regression and classification, and by having this possibility to split with respect to one feature and then with respect to another feature, we implicitly have also interactions and are also able to kind of model nonlinear effects. A nonlinear effect that, for example, looks like that by a decision tree is tried to model in this kind of manner here. And it's able to handle mixed feature spaces and missing values by default. We have seen the decision tree structure, so if you want to explain how a prediction was made, you just have to follow the tree path. And there's another nice thing about decision trees, because they're able to also give you some kind of feature importance measure. Since we are splitting the feature space with respect to a certain criterion, we can measure the improvement of this split criterion at each split, and then we can aggregate all improvements that were made with respect to a certain feature. Let's look at an example. Here we fitted a decision tree with depth of 3 to the bike sharing dataset. And we can see here, for example, that the first feature that was used for splitting was the days since 2011 in the left branch as well. So essentially we can measure the improvement in the split criterion from here to there. And since it's the same feature that was used for splitting, also from here to there, we can sum up the improvements and do this for all paths where this feature was involved. Here, for example, there's the feature that occurs again from here to there. The split also leads to a certain improvement, and all of these improvements can be aggregated to an importance score. So there's one problem with the classification and regression trees, and this is that it suffers from a so-called selection bias, meaning that features that have high cardinality or continuous features are usually preferred for splitting. And also it does not consider significant improvements, which tends to overfit if we make very deep trees. So these two issues can be addressed by two methods that belong to a framework of unbiased recursive partitioning. Here the unbiased refers to this selection bias, and there are two important methods: conditional inference trees and model-based recursive partitioning, short MOP and C-tree, that address this issue by doing the selection of the best feature used for splitting and the concrete split point of that feature in two separate steps, rather than taking account all features and all possible split points and select the best overall split. And the latter has shown to have issues with respect to this selection bias here. And it allows us to use hypothesis tests as a stopping criteria. Here, an illustration of the selection bias. We have simulated 200 observations with a normally distributed outcome and 3 features that are completely independent from this outcome. So they should not have any relationship with the target. They should be equally unimportant, all of them. But these 3 different types of features have different cardinalities. The first one is a binomial one, has only 2 outcomes. The second one is a categorical with 4 categories, and the third one a categorical with 8 categories. And now we can see, if we apply the decision tree and see which of these 3 features was used as the first feature for splitting in the first step. So since the target is independent from these 3 features, we shouldn't see that one of these 3 features is preferred in splitting, because all of them are equally unimportant. So all of them should be, if we repeat this process 500 times, selected with equal probability, because they are equally unimportant. However, the left bars here in red refer to the card algorithm, and we can see that there is a clear preference for the third feature, which was the feature that had 8 categories. And the feature that had only 2 categories was not really often used for selection as a first splitting variable. While the conditional inference tree approach here selects all of these 3 features over all these 500 repetitions equally often. So the difference to the card algorithm is that it addresses this selection bias by using a 2-step approach. So first of all, it separates the finding of the best split feature and the best split point. It does this in 2 separate steps. It also allows for fitting a parametric model in the leaf nodes, and it tells us how significant was a certain split that was performed in the decision tree. And while these 2 implementations or approaches for unbiased recursive partitioning are very similar and address this selection bias problem, they have also a difference, mainly in the hypothesis test they use for selecting the best feature. So C-tree, for example, uses an independence test where we test if there is an independence between the feature and the target, and MOP uses a fluctuation test which uncovers parameter instabilities and then splits according to the feature that has the most potential to improve this instability. And they differ also by how they find the best split point. Here just 2 examples of here C3 algorithm, which shows at each split point a p-value over here that is provided. And if we compare C3 with MOP, in that case we see a similar performance. MOP is slightly better because in this example it fits a linear regression model in the leaf nodes, which is more flexible than just a constant as we did in the C3 algorithm. There are of course also other rule-based models, for example decision rules. They're basically a chaining of simple if-then statements, similar to decision trees, but they are usually developed for classification and work mainly for categorical features. Another interesting algorithm is the RuleFit algorithm, which combines the linear model and the decision tree. It basically uses many decision trees to extract decision rules. Decision rules can be derived from these paths like this, for example, this or this here. So essentially kind of we create new features based on decision rules, and then we can train a regularized linear model, for example. And by this we allow also to model feature interactions and non-linearities.